In the earlier lecture, we configured user expressions which had parameter values which we need to send along to our server for fulfillment, such as the date on which we want to travel, the type of car that we're interested in, and so on. Now, how will we reference a particular value that was used to fill the parameter slot in the user expression? Let's say we need this value to include in our text response, as an example. We've seen this conversation earlier where a customer is interested in booking a room. You can see that an actual booking cannot be carried out till the customer provides us a bunch of information: the city he wants this room in, the date for which he wants the booking, and the kind of room that he prefers. All of this is required information which needs to be elicited from the user. And there is a way that you can have your bot elicit this information by asking specific questions. These questions are called prompts. The sole purpose of prompts is to conduct a conversation with the user and get the information needed in order to fulfill his intent, get specific details, the city he's visiting, the kind of room that he wants to live in, and so on. Specific details which are required to fulfill this intent. We are still in the middle of configuring our book cars intent. We are not completely done yet, so we'll pick up where we left off. At this point in the parameters table, we have the date and the kind of cars as our parameters. And if you've actually done the practice that I set for you in the last video, you would also have a city location within this parameters table. Don't worry if you don't have it, just follow along. I just have date and cars set up for now. Both date and cars and city, if you have that configured, are required parameters in order to book a car. So there is a checkbox there. You can specify them as required. Now, anytime you have required parameters, you have to ensure that you have prompts to elicit values for these required parameters. And as soon as you mark them required, notice on the very right of this table, there are the define prompts link which have appeared in order for you to configure prompts to elicit values for each of these parameters. Click on define prompts for the date parameter. Note though that these prompts will come into play and the chatbot will use these prompts only if the user has not specified a value for the date parameter in the user expression that he used to invoke this particular intent. If you don't have a value for the date, then the Dialogflow agent will use this prompt in order to get the value for date. Let's set up our prompts for a date. It can be something conversational like, when do you need the car? Or what date do you want this reservation to be for? And so on. You can choose to specify a single prompt or multiple prompts. If you have multiple prompts, then your agent will simply pick one of these to elicit the value of date. Click on close to close this dialog, and let's go ahead and define a prompt for the type of car that the user wants. You can simply say, what type of car would you like? A better practice would be to give him options that he can choose from. What kind of car would you like? I have a sedan, hatchback, convertibles, SUVs, and compact. This gives him an idea of what he can expect from his car booking. You can define additional prompts if you want to. Finally, click on close and you're done with defining prompts to elicit information for the required parameters. Within the parameters table, notice the value column. It has within it $date for the date parameter and $cars for the cars parameter. These are basically placeholders or variables which can be used to refer to the parameter values when you're having a conversation with the user. Now, let's say you wanted to say something like, done, your sedan for this Friday has been booked. This is where you'll use the $date and $cars in your text response. Now, you might look at these parameters and decide that it's important for you to get information about some of these before others. Let's say, well, a customer is trying to book a car, it's important that you understand the type of car that he can book before you ask him for date information. You can reorder the priority of these parameters by simply clicking on the arrow on the right and then moving it up or down based on which you consider higher or lower priority. Now, if you were setting up a bot end to end, including the fulfillment of this request by executing some server code which connects to a database and so on, then the response to this intent should be sent back by the server code. We are not connecting to a server yet. We'll see that later on in this course. So here I'll simply configure a text response that we'll send back to the user in order to reassure him that his car has been booked. One of your text responses could be, and you can configure multiple ones, reservation made, indicating success of the user's request. But this isn't really great though, because you aren't really confirming to him what exactly is the reservation that he has made. So you can simply say, done. I've booked you a dollar cars for dollar date. Remember, dollar cars and dollar date are placeholders. It'll simply extract the value from the user expression for the car that he had requested for and the date on which he had requested the car. You can reference any value specified in the parameters table by using this placeholder dollar followed by the placeholder name or the parameter name. Our BookCars intent is finally configured. Go ahead and hit save, and once you do that, notice the gear icon rotating on the left to show that your agent is being trained with this new information that you've added within the intent. We are done with configuration for now. Let's test out our book cars intent. So I type in, I need a car, and immediately you'll see the dialog flow understands that you are referring to the book cars intent, and it starts giving you back the prompts to elicit the required information. The parameter that you considered the highest priority was the car type, which is why the first prompt that you see is, what type of car would you like? Had you specified date to be the highest priority parameter, that is the prompt you would have seen first. This, of course, assumes that you haven't already specified a value for the date or the car type in the expression or the statement that you made to the bot. The agent correctly mapped you to the book car's intent. You can double check there, and you can see that we have no values for these parameters. Cars and date is required, but we have no values for them yet. Let's try a different user expression. If you say something like, get me a sedan, this once again points to the book car's intent, but your agent has realized that you already have specified a value for the type of car that you're interested in. So it goes straight away to the second prompt, which asks you what date you want this reservation for. In the test pane, if you notice the parameter table at the bottom, you'll see that we have a value associated with cars, that is sedan, but we have no value associated with date. We still need to fill that slot. In response to the user's prompt, I simply say today. So that's the date I need this reservation for. It identifies it as filling the date slot, and then I get a response which says my reservation has succeeded. Done. I've booked you a sedan for 5th October 2017. That's when I actually recorded this demo. Notice that it has identified today with a specific date. And my parameter table at the bottom there has both of the required slots filled. Let's take a third example of a user expression, reserve an SUV for me tomorrow. Here we've specified values for both parameters. These values will be extracted and our reservation will be completed right away. There'll be no follow-up prompts. Now, I'd mentioned this earlier that in this particular intent, we're only pretending to fulfill the user's request. We are not actually connecting with an external URL which will connect to a database and actually add in a booking. In order to do that, we need to configure a webhook URL which accepts a post request from Dialogflow. This post request contains a bunch of JSON with all the information needed to fulfill the intent. We're not actually doing that here. We'll do that in a later module. If you click on the Show JSON button there, it'll show you the JSON data that is sent along to the post request. This is what your server running at some URL will receive. Spend some time looking at this JSON and understand the various parameters that are being passed to this webhook URL that will fulfill our request. All the information needed to actually book a car is present here. What type of car we want, the date on which we want the booking, and so on. And now this question should be pretty straightforward for you to answer. In order to actually reference a parameter value that a user has specified in his user expression, you will use the placeholder, which is prefixed by the dollar character. So dollar cars will refer to the type of car that the user wants. Dollar date will reference the date on which the user wants this car booking to be made.